if our trying to control people on self-destructive paths would have worked, it would have worked. What always works is finding that place of love within ourselves. There once was an angel. His name is Philip. And he was given the assignment by God to come to earth and to take a woman up to heaven. She was complete with her mission here on earth. And so he came down to fulfill his role. And when he arrived, he saw her with 3 children and no husband. And they didn't have anything. They were so poor. And it struck open his human heart, if you will. And he felt upset. And he said, this is unfair. This is not okay. And he decided that he was going to take charge and he was going to help them. So he hid them away from God. And in order to help them, he had to become human. And so he did that. And he took on a job. He took on a second job. He took on a third job, doing his very best to try to help this family. But he couldn't make it happen. She was sick. The children were getting sick. It was hard to have shelter. He was exhausted. And one night, wandering home from his third job, so tired, he bumped into an angel that God had sent to him. And the angel said, Philip, what are you doing? And in his exhaustion, he said, I couldn't just let this happen to this family. It didn't seem fair. It's so unfair. And at that moment, the angel, she took her hand and she placed it on his forehead, and he felt the immediate comfort and the relaxation. And he also was able to see for a moment the perfection of God's plan. He saw how it was the perfect time for this woman's soul to leave the body and to serve her children in a larger way that was much more beautiful and helpful. He saw how these children would be blessed by the change and be given to 2 parents that were meant to love them and care for them, and who they would become as adults because of this experience. He saw the perfection of God in that moment, and he finally let go and he surrendered. It is our human eyes and our human understanding that gets in the way. The mind screams, this isn't fair. It shouldn't happen this way. Oh, it's such a shame. All these ways that we subtly and not so subtly judge what is happening. Because there's a part of us that thinks it should be different. Anyone else seduced by that besides me? It shouldn't go this way. It's not okay. Something's wrong, the mind screams. And the moment that the mind screams that, we disconnect from the divine. We cannot serve 2 masters. We talk about that all the time. So as we disconnect from the divine, we become more immersed in the struggle and the strife of life. And there's such a large wave of that happening that it actually makes us feel like we're a part of something, like we belong. We belong to this wave of upset because it seems crazy. It seems absolutely crazy to get out of the wave of upset and stand on the shore and declare that the goodness of God is here, that something magnificent is working out, and to ask that that magnificent something activate my mind and my heart so that I can see it and feel it and serve it. Because you see, that something wonderful requires you to be in a state of peace. You can't connect to the divine and be in the upset of the world. So in order to be one with God, to serve love, we have to step back and activate it within ourselves. We have to call upon it within ourselves. It says in AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, big book, it says, in everyone's psyche, there existed an unconquerable ego which bitterly opposed any thought of defeat. Until that ego was somehow reduced or rendered ineffective, no likelihood of surrender could be anticipated. Now, in the big book, they're talking about alcoholics and addicts. And if you are one, or you know one, you know that we fight, me included, fight tooth and nail to not surrender. This points to the strength of the ego. And what we mean by ego is the part of you that believes you're separate from God. We all have a part within us. We wouldn't be here in this way if we didn't. We have a part that believes it's separate. And it takes on a life force. And how does it take on a life force? Because you feed it. You feed this life force. You make the separated I, if you will, you bring it to life. And then it says, oh, I'll take care of you. And it wraps its yucky arms around you and you identify with it. And suddenly you believe you're out there on the stormy sea alone. And so what does the ego do? The ego says, well, connect with other people like you, other people that think the way you think. It is so challenging to let go of the ego. Very few. In fact, we all have a handful of names. Eckhart Tolle, Byron Katie, Jesus, Buddha. We have a very small list of people who we look to go, they seemed to become free from the ego. And in their freedom from the ego, they became a stream of the Christ light. And they served from it, and they shined in the center of it. But the ego says, oh, who are you to think you're that? Well, get it together. I know how you think, and I know how you feel. You ain't that. And again, we're off in the separated boat. It fights for its life, but it is not of God. The part that believes it's separate, the part that's judging the world, the part that cannot see the goodness that is inherent in everything, that part is who we think we are. And obviously, letting go of it, everyone's psyche, it's deeply wired inside of you, and it existed an unconquerable ego. Unconquerable, which means you of yourself cannot make this different. You can't go, oh, that's the ego. I'll just get rid of it. Good luck. It's like a, what do you call that thing you throw? And it comes back. Boomerang. It's like a boomerang. It comes right back. So what it requires is surrender. What it requires is an admittance of my powerlessness. This in this moment is bigger than me. I can't just become free of it, because if I could, I would. And thank God there's something else that will do it for you. Thank God inherent there is what is called the Holy Spirit, the Christ light, the divine, the higher self, higher power, whatever word you call it. There is something that when you call upon it, it becomes activated. And it will show you the way to freedom. It will take over. So your part is actually simple. It's the asking and the surrendering to. The challenge, the reason it becomes big, is because the ego whispers a story to you. And it says, you're going to become a doormat. You're going to get walked on. You're going to look like a fool. Oh, you want to be one of those people? The ego's mean, and it will fight for its life, but it is never stronger than the grace of God. And that's who you are, and that's who we're here to be, and that's what the world needs. And the fact that we're sitting in a unity church, this, from its inception, for me, was a higher vibration than the other teachings. Not calling anyone wrong, it just felt more true for me. And it had inherent in it this kind of surrender that led me more and more over my years to believe in this power and to trust this power when the world was showing me something different. You know, this election is over, but it's not over. Because it's a representation of a divide of two energies that are finding themselves so diametrically opposed that there's no listening anymore. And I've said this before as I listen to both sides, because I don't feel like I live in either. When I listen to both sides, I'm like, they're saying the same thing. They're calling each other the same names. They're doing the same thing to each other, which says to me, it's really one wanting to come together in the Spirit. And I think we underestimate how much one person, the positive effect that you can have in the world and in the vibration of humanity when you take the time to unite and unify and surrender inside yourself. It's such a powerful thing to do. What are we surrendering to? That's important. Because when we know that and we trust that, then it becomes easier. We are surrendering to God's will. To God's will that is only good. And this is the deal. Add that on. God's will. Well, what is God's will? I don't fully know what it is, but I know it's only good. God's will that is only good. Do you have an ounce of faith to contemplate that, to avail yourself to it? There's something good here. I know it looks like that person's walking out the door. I know it looks like that person has a terminal illness. I know it looks like all these horrible things are happening in the world, and it looks like it's so horrific. And yet, can I find within me the willingness to say, God's will be done. God's will is being done. And the more I surrender to God's will, the more that I become the place for it. Very often when I pray, and I pray this all day, God, thy will that is only good be done. God, thy will that is only good be done in me. And I need to pray it a lot because I have a lot of opinions. I have a lot of ideas how I think you should live your life. So be glad I'm praying, right? Because I still tell you sometimes, even when I'm praying. We all do that and we laugh. And it's a good laugh. But when we surrender to God's will, really what I discover is that God's will often says, Mark, don't speak. Just be quiet. Be quiet and listen. Be quiet and back up a step. And just think, God's will be done here. God's will be done here. God's will be done here. If you will loop that in your head, in the middle of something which appears to be painful and separating, if you will just loop that in your head, it will become your focus point. And as it becomes your focus point, that becomes the blessing. And you become a blessing in the middle of something. Just by lifting your attention up to the simple words, God's will be done here. It pulls you out and it lifts you up. You have that power inside of you. And for me, and I'm guessing for you, the faster I get there, the better off I am and everyone else is. Because if I listen and get entertained by the story for a long time, well, it doesn't take long. Where suddenly, like, you've got that, this is just good. Can you believe that? Can you believe they said that, they did that? And that's the point where I have kind of lost that particular moment. I've lost that moment to the wave. It's okay because you'll always come back to God, but it's a much more fulfilling life the less we get taken out on the waves, the less we go out and have to find our way back. It's a much more fulfilling way to be. You know, Jesus said, in Matthew 16, 24, 25. Then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Now, talk about the ego mind screaming at this kind of a quote. Who does that guy think he is? How arrogant. We got to follow him. And we judge. There's a big judgment of people who follow Jesus and they're passionate about it. We've got all kinds of stories about it. To me, this teaching has a much higher vibration than following Jesus, the man. If you will insert Christ consciousness, then Jesus said to his disciples, if anyone wishes to come after me, after the expression of this Christ light, if you wish to be this Christ light, then you must deny yourself, take up the cross and follow this light. You must deny the belief that you're separate. You must deny the chatter of the mind that keeps lying to you about how bad or not enough you are. You must deny the part of you that is judging and slicing and dicing and blaming and shaming. You must deny all of that. And then turn your attention to the Christ light and follow that light. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it. But whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. Save the life of the small self. If you wish to save your identity, if you wish to save face, if you wish to stand so like you've got it all together in your humanness, you will lose your connection to the life force. But if you will lay all that down, and it's hard in the beginning, but if you will lay it down and ask for help to do it, you will pick up within you the Christ light, and you will shine. It's such a beautiful promise. It's such a wonderful, cool thing, and it's a place where we stand, where we have this wonderful option. And it really is a choice point. Course in Miracles says that the sight of Christ is all there is to see. The song of Christ is all there is to hear. The hand of Christ is all there is to hold. There is no journey but to walk with him. Now, this is the ultimate truth. This speaks to oneness. This speaks to all that there is this light and love of God. There is nothing else. There's no other song being sung. There's no other voice to hear. When all else disappears, you hear this one song of love. Not only do you hear this song of love, you have a little voice in your head that goes, I am that. I am that. And a remembering will take over you. Because you will realize that you never were anything but that one beautiful song, that one beautiful voice, that one beautiful presence. This is who we are, and there's no compromise. We don't get I want to take a little bit of that blame and be one with Christ. You have passed through, as I say often, you have passed through the invisible door. You have said yes on some level of your being. Your full awakening experience has begun. So when it's begun, this is the point where it's like, don't make it hard. Don't beat yourself up when you do fall down, but the more you pray, Paul says pray ceaselessly. I think it's Paul. It says pray ceaselessly. It means align with the light over and over and over. Throughout your day, everywhere you go, ask. What am I to say here? What am I to do here? And when the voice says, please don't speak, just see if you can pull back. Now, I'm talking about the hard place. I'm talking about with your daughter. I'm talking about with your son. I'm talking about with that husband or wife or partner. I'm talking about the people that you really think you have to control because they are of you, because they're your family. Oh, now it becomes a different game. Isn't that interesting? The very people that God gave us to unconditionally love, to practice letting go over and over and over, we think we know the best for. And it's so irritating when they don't listen. I know. Believe me, I understand. I'm not kidding you. I would love to tell you how to live your life. Come on over. I'll pour you some coffee and I'll tell you exactly what I think you should do. But I actually invite you to run in the other direction. I invite you to say, Mark, just pray. It's a much better place. The ones that are closest to you are the ones that trigger most the place where God is calling you to surrender. Could you find that spot? And I'm not saying it's easy, because if someone you love is out there and living an addictive life, if someone out there appears to be destroying themselves, every part of you screams against that. But if our trying to control people on self-destructive paths would have worked, it would have worked. What always works is finding that place of love and acceptance and grace within ourselves. And that requires a big surrender. So as we're moving through the completion, if you will, the challenges of our country, this is the best place to play. Can I be a space of love for all? Can I take myself out of the noise of division and ask God to use me as a voice in oneness, even if that is just inside myself? This, to me, is the greatest gift. I know some people are like, I got to get out there and march. I got to go get it. And that's great. If you're going to do that, do it from the oneness. I'm not saying don't have a voice. Check where your voice is coming from. Two people can do the very same thing. One is going at anger and division. One is coming from love and unification. We always want to check that within ourselves. And we want to surrender the division. Surrender, surrender, surrender. And line up in the center. One of the best ways to do that is to laugh your way into letting go. If you can find a part of you that can go, wow, this is so silly. Look on me. See, the ego doesn't have a chance if you laugh at it. It is the most destructive thing the most positive and the most, how do I say this? It is the thing in you that will shut the ego down the quickest when you look at it and you laugh at it. And trust me, you're very laughable when you're in your ego. And this is interesting. You know, I found this. On average, children laugh 400 times a day. On average, adults laugh, what do you think? You're all right. I can't hear you. 15. On average, 15 times a day compared to 400. Again, be ye as a child. Laugh at the ego. Laugh at the part of you that thinks you know everything. Just out loud, oh my gosh, I think I know how everyone should live their lives. Ha 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 ha. Even a fake Santa Claus laugh will bring you into some loosening up, some letting it go, because it really is laughable. It is, and that heals, right? All right, take a deep breath. Let's move into some prayer. I invite you, if you're comfortable, to open your hands to receive. Close your eyes and just focus on that breath for a moment, because a lot of information has come at us in these few minutes. So let's just breathe it in and imagine it all kind of calibrating and aligning within us. Keep breathing.
It's by thy grace that I sing. It's by thy grace that I sing. It's by thy grace that I sing your holy name.
Just imagine surrendering, surrendering, surrendering. Let go.
It's by thy grace
Whew.
that I feel. It's by thy grace
Hear this song inside yourself.
that I feel. It's by thy grace
Yes.
that I feel your holy name.
In this moment, I place my full attention in this prayer upon the grace of God. The grace of God that heals and transcends and transforms, renews and restores. This presence is undeniable. It was in the beginning, it will be in the end. And this is who you are. This grace says, oh my beloved, this grace says, give yourself to me and I will show you a magnificent way. This grace says to you, I will use your gifts and talents. I will flow through your words. I will be the presence of love that needs not a single move or a single word spoken, and yet it will still do its fantastic work. In this moment, we surrender to this grace. I surrender to this magnificent life. Breathe that in. Let go and let God right now.
Someday the day shall come when all the glory shall be thine. People will say it is yours, but I shall deny, not mine.
Sing along.
Oh, it's
By thy grace that I sing.
that I sing.
It's by thy grace
It's by thy grace
that I sing.
that I sing.
It's by thy grace
It's by thy grace
that I sing.
that I sing
Your holy name. Feel the expansion. Surrender to the prayer.
I love Jehovah Rama Satanama.
Open up.
I love Jehovah Rama Satanama. Peace to all,
Life to all.
life to all,
Love to all.
love to all.
Sing that again. Peace to all.
Peace to all,
Life to all.
life to all,
Love to all.
love to all.
Take a breath. Feel the beauty of that. That's prayer. That is living prayer that we shared. And I'm so grateful. And in this gratitude, I release it all and we let it be. It shall be done. And so it is. Amen. Amen.